Okay, welcome to another Anderson webinar, How to Save Your Assets and Protect Your Business. I'm Steve Pellegrino, and with me today is an Anderson Business Advisors Partners, Mike Bowman.
Good evening, everybody.
So Mike, today we're going to talk about pretty much corporate formalities and what exactly it means to stay in compliance. It's really important to be in compliance, I understand that. But what exactly does it mean to be in compliance?
Well, basically, what we want to do, and this is the whole purpose of the webinar tonight, is because we want to make sure that the entity protects our assets. And one of the reasons why a lot of courts go through it is a simple fact that people don't respect their entities and they don't treat them as a separate being from themselves.
Well, you know, I've heard a term a lot and it's thrown around a lot, and I think the image on the front page here is actually alluding to that. But what exactly does it mean when you say piercing the veil?
Piercing the veil is basically when you go through and disrespect the separateness of the business versus the person. And so it can happen both ways. It can go from the actual entity liabilities going to the owners, and also from the owner into the liability or into the entity itself. Now, when I'm looking at the reasons why courts do it, there's about 4 or 5 top reasons, and the top one that when I was doing litigation that always came out is the simple fact that the owner of the business did not respect the corporate or the entity formalities. And what I mean by that is they treated it just like a alter ego. What I mean by that is when a business expense came up, they paid for it out of their business account, and then maybe a personal expense would come out and they'd pay for it out of the personal or the business account to pay for a personal item. Using the business account, whether it's an LLC, a corporation, for personal items, personal expenses, is a surefire way that will unwind the protections of a business. I always tell the story of being in a grocery store and being in a checkout line, and this actually happened. I'm in a checkout line, and I'm not that nosy, but a little bit. So I'm looking at the person in front of me. I'm seeing what they're buying for groceries, and then they go to pay. And what happened was they pulled out a business debit card, and you can always tell because it says business right at the top of it. And you know, from my litigation background, from my experience in running businesses, I know that's a big no-no because those were not for a corporate party. They weren't for any business purpose. Those were personal groceries. And so me being me, and those of you who know me, what happened was I said, hey, wait, don't pay for that personally, or don't pay for that business card, pay for it personally. Well, a lot of you know the story. Well, what the person said back to me was mind your own business, but they put a little extra word in that sentence to me. You know, what I was trying to do is stop the person who is paying for the groceries with the business card, stop them from disrespecting their business entity. What happens is if you disrespect the business entity, then the court isn't going to have any respect for it also. And why that's so important, and I know some of you are sitting there and thinking about it and thinking to yourself, well, how is the court going to know? Well, if litigation comes through, one of the things that a plaintiff's attorney might do is get a forensic accountant to look at the procedures of the businesses, the bookkeeping of the business, and they will go through and recreate the picture. Forensic accounts are very expensive, but they're very accurate, and it's amazing what they can do with numbers and receipts and expenditures in the picture that they can create.
Is that what they mean when they talk about commingling funds?
Commingling funds, somewhat. Commingling funds comes around when let's say you have an LLC, and the LLC is for, we'll just take a traditional rental property. Let's say that you go ahead and take the rent check and you put in your personal account. Well, that's commingling funds. If you have your rental property in an LLC, when that rent check is written out, it should be to the LLC, and that should go into the LLC's separate bank account. Commingling funds is basically, a broad definition would simply be taking business assets and funds and treating them like your own. and then also not following on the other side, not following the proper formality of getting money into your business. And what I mean by that is if you're going to loan your entity money, then you need to follow that up with a formalization, and we do that by a promissory note.
So you have here on this first slide, this was really caught my eye. What about the IRS?
Yeah, I think you actually posted it earlier. You know what the IRS stands for?
Theirs.
Exactly. So if you put the and IRS together, it means theirs. So why I put this in the slide is simply because if you don't treat your business like a business, if you start commingling funds, if you start having some questionable expenses or expenses that you are actually benefiting from, then the IRS can come in and disallow those expenses. If the expense and the amounts come out to a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage, the IRS can say that was fraud, and they can you're going to be penalized. And so you want to make sure your books are accurate and cleaned up. There's a slide in the future that we're going to look at, and one of the things we want to do is make sure that we do proper bookkeeping and that we do proper minutes and resolutions. When you go into an IRS audit, you really want to make sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Simple the fact that if they look at you and they look at your books and records and they see that you have everything put together and professional, and that all your ducks are in a row, they're not going to waste their time on you. They're going to go to someone else who doesn't have their act together. One of the things I wanted to put on here in talking about the piercing the corporate veil is fraud. If you commit fraud, generally you're out of luck. You can't use entities to commit fraud. There's fraudulent transfer acts, and so that was something I put in there that to make sure that everything's above board, and that if you are going to commit fraud, you're not going to rely on the entity to protect you. I actually had that question earlier this morning. Not a client, but a person called in with a question for me, wanting to know if the thing that they did in a few months ago, if they put all their assets into a business, if the asset protection would work or not. And the answer is no. If you committed fraud, they're going to be able to pierce right through it. And I like that.
So what's the major concern? Why is this so important?
Well, it's important is because we work really hard. Now, the whole business idea, the whole business concept, it's not by accident. Long ago, in fact, when the trade routes were established, the governments wanted to provide an incentive for people to take risks. And they were realizing that, hey, if one of these ships went down and the owner was held 100% liable, then that risk would outweigh the reward of starting a business. And so we created a thing called liability protection from the business. And so what the laws are in effect for is that businesses are a separate being from the individual owner. And as long as you keep the formalities and keep the respect up, then the law will protect you from the business activities. And then also, it will also protect the business from the owner's activities. A good example of this, Steve, is going to be, let's say that you and I start a business and we form a business and we're up and running, we're doing well. And all of a sudden you get in a car accident, or you do something fraudulent, or you do something where you get sued and a judgment's levied against you. Well, the law wants to protect me from your judgments. And so what they view the corporation as is a separate being from the owners. And so your activities aren't supposed to affect my ownership in the business and the business activities. So it's all about protection. I can summarize this webinar in about one kind of a quote, and it'd be failure to operate in a business-like manner is going to be able to make or allow the courts to pierce through the corporate veil. Now, if we look at a concern and why we do asset protection in the first place, why we form business entities, our concern is to separate the business from ourselves and also from any judgment from that come out. Now, when I did litigation, I always called litigation and plaintiff's attorneys, I always looked at it as plaintiff's attorneys do what we call a shotgun method. They go after everybody. What happens is they rely on suing everybody, hoping that the person will settle out of court. Now, most cases nowadays do settle out of court, and unfortunately, it's somewhat of a hostage situation or extortion. And so, they would typically work like this. Well, Steve, if I put a lawsuit against you or 5 different people, and you had, maybe a chance of winning, maybe a chance of losing, but it's going to cost you $20,000, maybe you might come to me and say, hey, would you take 10? And then you settle out, and then I would dismiss you from the case. So what the whole idea of asset protection is, separating the person from the business, is to actually put you on a level playing field with these out of control plaintiffs who just sue everybody. Because if I sued you and you know that I'm not going to be able to get anything from you, then you have a little more confidence. Or let's say this, it can actually prevent a lawsuit, and I've seen this happen. Let's say I sue you, Steve, and I realize that all your assets are protected. You've got multi-layers of protection. You might have some in-state LLCs, maybe a Nevada holding LLC, and I start realizing where your assets and how they're arranged. And I realize that, hey, you know what? I might be able to go after Steve, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to get anything. Well, I'm going to have to do a cost-benefit analysis, because I don't want to spend 3 years of my time and my firm's money fronting the costs to get nothing at the end of it. That's called pro bono. And as a law firm, as a plaintiff's firm, you can't take these cases that you can't get paid on. You'll go out of business. We want to look at kind of an overview on, before we get into the real formalities, doing minutes, bookkeeping, things like that. I thought it'd be helpful if we went back and looked at the anatomy of an LLC, an anatomy of the corporation. There's 2 types of management that we can use in an LLC. The first one's going to be manager managed. The second one's going to be member managed. It's quite simple. With manager managed, you are centralizing the control. Manager managed, you're going to appoint either a person or an entity to manage the LLC. In fact, we use a corporation a lot to take control, so that we can pay the management company a fee. But we also want to go ahead and centralize the control so that if there's passive members, they can stay passive. Because what a member manages is anyone who's a member is going to have the management authority and management control. Now, there's a couple different types of LLCs that we look at from a business standpoint. One of the questions I have here is where to file. A real foundation to this is, where are you doing business? Now, if you're just holding liquid assets, you're not doing business in a particular state, so you can pretty much file anywhere you want. What I want to do is look at, if I'm looking for asset protection, I want to go ahead and look at a state that has what we call sole remedy charging order, meaning that if the owner gets sued, the person who's suing and gets a judgment can't go in and attack the assets of the protective entity. If I'm actually doing business in a state, with an LLC, a lot of times we're going to hold rental property. Well, if I'm holding rental property in a particular state, if I just use it and I deed the property to the LLC and I start renting it out through the LLC, then I'm actually doing business in that state and I need to be filed in that state. Okay. Now, one of the most important aspects of an LLC, and I really believe it's one of the most overlooked, is the operating agreement. I used to joke around about a company called LegalZoom, and in the false sense of security about that they give their clients. Now I don't think it's a joke at all, because the operating agreements that come out of those companies are pretty much boilerplate, and they ignore some of the crucial articles and provisions in there. The one that I see ignored the most is mandatory distributions. And I imagine that even with attorneys, it works like this. Steve, if you came to me and you said, Michael, I need to start a business, I want to start a business, and I'd ask you a few different questions, and then I'd ask you some questions so I could design the operating agreement. One of the questions I would ask you is, hey, would you like to be able to get money out whenever you wanted?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the initial response, right? Is of course I would. And so what the attorney does is he puts in a provision that the members can go ahead and demand distributions whenever they want. And the owner of the LLC is happy because now they feel like, oh, if they want a new car, they can just go ahead and get a distribution out of the LLC. Well, giving you the power to demand a distribution unwinds the power of the asset protection. Because, Steve, if you as an owner have the power to demand a distribution, then your creditors also have that power. And so that's one of the things I see a lot of the times is that people, it sounds really good, but if you look at it from an asset protection concept, it's not good at all. In fact, it undoes everything that we're trying to accomplish with an operating agreement. And so when we're looking at the protecting the entity, either from ourselves or from the actions of other people, we want to look at how formal is it? And I know it doesn't sound much, but really the look and feel of the LLC makes a difference in the courtroom. Having it professionally put together, it really makes a difference. I really want all the formalities put together so that if someone looked at it, that they would say, okay, these LLC documents, these corporate documents, those were done and they were treated with respect. A lot of times I see clients come in and they have a stapled piece of paper and it says operating agreement. That's not going to work. You need to actually go through the formalities. Some of the formalities I put down here is, have you issued actual units and unit certificates? Have you gone the next step and actually recorded them in the unit ledger? And so there's a lot of different, it's just not filing with the state and then getting EIN from the IRS. You actually have to go ahead and follow it all the way through. And the last step is going to be issuing those units to the members and recording the unit ledger. I put down something at the end and I put in, has your structure changed? And do the units reflect the change? Over time, we add assets, we change our structures a little bit. Maybe at the time when we set up LLCs or corporations, we didn't have a living trust. Or maybe we've added multiple LLCs and now it's time to put into effect a holding LLC. We need to go ahead and tidy our structures up. If we have multiple LLCs that we all want to run down to a holding LLC, then what we need to do is go ahead and change the unit certificates and record it in the ledger and make sure that that change is recorded and make sure that we follow through with the formalities. Now, one thing on a living trust, if you've been putting off a living trust, please, please, please contact our office. Make sure you get this put into place. I can't tell you enough and how many different phone calls we get throughout the month that, of friends of clients calling in and saying, hey, can you quickly put together a living trust? This just happened in my family, or this just happened. And once something happens, it's generally too late. We want to make sure that that living trust is put into effect before something happens. And sometimes I think about the living trust. A lot of people put it on what I call someday island. Is someday they'll do it. And then that someday finally comes right when some bad tragedy happens. Please, please, please get your living trust. Just over the last week, we've had some experiences that could have been prevented by a good estate plan. All right. So let's look at corporations. I wanted to look at the actual corporations in how it's run. The corporations, basically, there's some positions I want to talk about. Each of these positions need to be filled. Shareholders, directors, officers. I explained the shareholders as the foundation of the pyramid. Basically, they're the owners of the business. They're going to go ahead and hire the directors, and the directors are going to go ahead and do the broad control and the broad policy for the corporations or the corporation, and they're going to direct the officers. And the officers are going to carry out the day-to-day activities of the corporation.
And all of those things have to be recorded correctly.
You're correct. You're going to have meetings. The shareholders are going to have meetings to elect the directors. The directors are going to have meetings to elect the officers. And these are all going to be recorded in what we call minutes of the meetings. Now, I put into the slides here, where do you want the control? And I also should have added, who do you want to control? if you're a parent and you have kids that are over the age of 18 for a director, or they have the capacity to do activities on the behalf of the corporation, I encourage you as parents to go ahead and include your kids in the corporation. Where I would put them is either as a director or an officer, or a small percentage of shareholder. I do not like kids having any sort of control from the shareholder level. I would put them in as a director or an officer. The reason why I encourage that with my clients is I want their kids to have financial stewardship. I want them to learn about how and what their parents are investing in, and what types of business they're in case something happens and that business goes down to the kids are going to have more financial stewardship. They're going to have a better idea of the business or what the parents are trying to accomplish. Same concept when we look at where to file. Where are you doing business, and are you touching concerning citizens of a particular state? Just like the operating agreement was the owner's manual of the LLC, the bylaws are going to be the owner's manual of the corporation. This is where we get our protections, either as directors, shareholders, or officers. This is going to be the list of instructions and how the business is run. I always get irritated when I see a set of bylaws that are 10 pages long. Even if you had really microscopic font, you couldn't cover everything you need to cover and still look like a legitimate business. And again, share certificates need to be issued, and the formalities of recording the issuing of the shares inside of the stock ledger. All right, let's look at some of the day-to-day activities. Inside your business, you're going to do the hiring, firing, tending to the business. And what I mean by that is what I simply talked about before: members meetings for LLCs, manager meetings for LLCs, and shareholder meetings for corporations, director meetings for corporations. Some of you are maybe thinking right now, as Michael keeps on talking about meetings in LLCs, and you're thinking to yourself, I've heard or I've read on the internet that LLCs don't have to have meetings. I've never agreed with that. And the reason why I don't agree with it is I don't think a court is going to see an LLC that just has a couple pages of an operating agreement, no meetings, and agree that that's actually a separate business, or actually a business that was treated with respect. By having meetings, and then the next question becomes, well, Michael, if you're saying that, yeah, I need to have meetings and I record these meetings, how many meetings do I need to have? The simple answer would be is to say as many as you need. And if you really wanted me to quantify it, I'd say at least 4, at least a quarterly meeting. And then the next question that I get is, well, what are these meetings on? And especially in an LLC. Well, the LLC basically is going to have assets in it. And so as the meetings for the LLC, what they're going to do is the dealing with those assets. In fact, let's say the LLC owns a piece of rental property, and the rental property, it might need a new roof. Well, just even thinking, did the rental property does it need a new roof or not? That's a meeting that should be recorded. In fact, it should read something like this. The members met, discussed the roof on 123 Lane Street. It was decided that the roof can last another 5 years. This issue will be revisited in 5 years. It can be as simple as that. So always record the events of the different business entities, and those are recorded in meetings. Now, here's something I wanted to specify. If you're going into contracts with the entity, it's very, very, very important that you put the other party on notice that they're just dealing with you as an agent on the behalf of the business entity. For instance, if you sign on the behalf of an LLC, it should be Michael Bowman, manager of ABC LLC. Very, very important. What is going to happen if you do get sued, in a good way that we pierce the corporate veil, is opposing counsel is going to allege that their client, the plaintiff in the case, basically thought that they were dealing with Michael Bowman as an individual, didn't know anything about this LLC out there. Therefore, all the assets of Michael Bowman should be used to satisfy a judgment. So it's very, very important to go ahead and designate that you're acting on behalf of the LLC and that there's an actual LLC involved.
So sign with your title and the name of the company. Absolutely,
sign with the title, with your title, your name, the title, and on behalf of whatever entity you're acting on the behalf of. This is a question that I get all the time. Do I need to have a separate bank account for each business entity? And my answer is unequivocally yes. Without a doubt, you must have a separate bank account for each entity. Now, the reason why is because if you don't, then the court's going to look at it like it's just one big pile or one big pot that should be subject to the lawsuit. I know at times you have 15 different LLCs. Yes, you do need to have 15 different bank accounts. That's going to show that you're keeping the business affairs separately. One of the cases that just came out was a case called Green Hunter Energy versus Western Ecosystems. In that case, one of the contributing factors of the veil being pierced was the lack of separateness of funds, lack of funding, and lack of formalities in respect between the parent company and the child company or the sub company. And so, yes, having a separate bank account is highly important. And you can't stop there. I want that separate entity to also have its own financial and historical records. What do I mean by that? Is you need to do bookkeeping. You need to keep records of the expenses and the income that comes into there. And you also need to keep track of the decisions that were made, such as the minutes and of the meetings that you have.
And this harkens back to the original story you told earlier, where do not pay for business expenses with personal funds or vice versa.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just to harp on that a little more, making sure that there's a separation between personal and business. If the check is written out of the entity, it needs to go in the entity's bank account. Now, from a real world perspective, what happens if the a tenant, let's say that you have a rental a property that's in your name when it originates. You get a tenant, they're writing the check out to you personally. Then you go ahead and follow our advice and you put the asset into the LLC. Well, the tenant still wants to write the check out to you personally, correct? So what do you do, Steve, if you get a check written to you personally for the rent of the rental house?
I don't know. Should I ask them to rewrite a check?
You could ask them to rewrite the check. Thank goodness you didn't say deposit it or send it back. You never ever send it back because it's already probably the 15th of the month. And if you send it back, you're not getting your rent that month. You could endorse it over and then put it in the LLC's account. But then you want to go ahead and put the other party on notice that they're dealing with the LLC. So how would you do that? How I would do it is I would send them a letter stating that this property has been transferred into XYZ LLC. Please make the check out to XYZ LLC. And I would send it by certified mail so you have a copy and notice that you actually put them on notice that they're dealing with the LLC and not you personally. All right. We've talked about going ahead and signing on behalf of the LLC. This is an example of how you would do it. Notice how it's going to say ABC LLC on the above the signature line, and then by, and then you go ahead and sign there. You don't need to go ahead and repeat, come a manager or come a president. You just need to go ahead and you can sign your name there. It's already designated. Same thing with the check. If it's a corporate check and your company is designated at the top of it, you don't need to go ahead and fill it out. Michael Bowman, President, ABC Inc. or what have you.
You're already on the account as
a signer, and they're put on notice that they're dealing that checks from ABC Inc. All right, meetings. This is where I see clients somewhat get lazy, and in fact, we've created a program, called the corporate concierge, and because we were finding that our clients were somewhat getting a little bit lazy in recording their decisions. They would have these meetings. They would think about it. They would just make a decision on behalf of the business entity, but they'd fail to record it. And so what we've done is put together that where you fill out a questionnaire, we'll go ahead and draft your minutes for you and send them out to you. Every decision should be made. As I stated earlier, your directors in a corporation are going to make broad policy. Let's say that you decide to invest in a certain type of investment. At that point, you just had a directors meeting. It is that simple. And so what I would do is I would go ahead and create a minutes of the special directors meeting. In a little side note, every year you're also going to have what we call annual shareholder meetings and also annual director meetings. And you'll record those decisions. You may, at your annual meetings, go ahead and discuss what you're going to be doing in the following year. And then in your quarterly meetings, you want to go ahead and discuss where you're at with those goals. And so those all, again, need to be recorded. My hope is that, each client has a big, thick folder or binder of minutes of their meetings. I can't tell you enough how that would strengthen a judge's perspective of you, and even an opposing counsel's perspective of you. If they see that you've treated the business like a business, then they know that they're going to have to treat the business like a business. All right, one of the things I wanted to show is just how simple it can be. There's a lot of legalese on this, but this is what we call minutes of the special meeting of managers. This is what it's going to look like when you do your meetings for your LLC. And then it's also for a corporation, it's going to look similar too for your directors meetings. Your directors meetings are going to happen more frequently than your shareholders meetings. One last thing that I wanted to cover is bookkeeping. I look at bookkeeping from a couple different perspectives. Number one, I look at, as an attorney and as a recovering litigation attorney, I look at keeping your books and records as a mandatory requirement of the IRS, but it's also to be able to make sure that your entity, it stands up on its own. The other thing I see is if you keep accurate bookkeeping, and if you make sure that you see where your money is being spent, see where you're getting income into your business, I see that you have a bigger finger on your financial pulse. You see if your activities are being profitable or not. You see exactly how much money you're spending on certain activities. And then you can do a cost-benefit analysis against those activities. Sometimes you think you're being profitable, but once you start taking into account all the costs, you might find out that you're not as profitable as you think, and you might be even running at a loss. I'd much rather have you guys do your books and records and make sure that you guys understand each month where you're at, where your business is, how much you're spending. And it's much better to find that out early on and instead of when it was too late. All right. For bookkeeping, when you're doing your transactions, and especially when you're keeping records for the IRS, and many of you know who Steve Kalt is. He has an ongoing joke with me because I was being really diligent. And I think I was a lot like a lot of the people who are on this webinar today. I was keeping all my receipts. And all my receipts, I would write who, what, where, when, why. And the problem is many of you guys keep your receipts in a shoebox for taxes. Well, I was keeping them in a basket next to my window. And a lot of you guys know I live in Las Vegas. So what happens during the summer, Steve? How are the summers cool here, or are they? What are they like?
Oh, they are beautifully warm.
Yeah, beautifully warm. No, they're darn right hot.
Hot.
So my all these receipts were placed in a basket near the window. I wasn't paying attention until I started to
smell fire.
No, still smell fires, right? So I started compiling them all, and I realized that they were all all the ink had disappeared. There was that thermal paper. Couldn't read any of them. I could read the notes. And so I had to go back and recreate from the notes, and it was just a big pain. That's a lack of bookkeeping. I use that story. I don't care if you laugh at me or not on that. Learn from my mistakes. Ever since then, I've had bookkeeping done on all my businesses. It is something you want to keep doing and keep up to date. The other reason why you want to keep it up to date is simply the fact that if you don't keep it up to date and you try to compile, let's say, today's the perfect day. Let's say you think, oh, I'm just going to run home and I'm going to do my taxes tonight because it's April 15th. I hope nobody's sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, it's April 15th, it's tax day. Hope everyone's already got their taxes done. But let's say you ran home and you try to compile all your receipts. There is a very good chance that you're going to forget about an expense you had from the previous year. Think about it. It's we're right now we're dealing with 2014, and so you have to think all the way back to January 2014. And if you're going to have to recreate every single month, and there's a very good chance that you're not going to remember all your expenses. And so what you've just done is you have to earn more profit because you're paying higher taxes. So that's another reason why accurate bookkeeping is very, very important. I like it from the reasons I've discussed. Number one, gets a finger on the financial pulse. Number two, it shows the IRS that you're treating the business like a business. Number three is basically that you can do a cost benefit analysis on what your expenses are versus your income, and you can make a change before it's too late.
I'll tell you something, statistically speaking, Mike, it's actually a very scary statistic, but as many as 78 to 80% of businesses do not have proper documentation about what they're doing, which means they're at risk for all those things that you said. And in respect to that, that's why we created the Corporate Concierge Program. And that program specifically is dedicated to helping our clients with, understanding the responsibilities, the duties of owning a business and what you have to do. And the Corporate Concierge Program is there to help you do that. Because think about this. The paperwork to these corporations, it can be somewhat daunting for people, especially if they've never owned a business before, don't you think?
Well, you know what? That's what I hear all the time. And I joke around this when I'm speaking at different conferences. I hear, oh, my accountant said, don't form a corporation. There's too much paperwork and there's too many corporate formalities to deal with. Well, the paperwork, once you start really thinking about it, Steve, just imagine this. How long does it take to hold a meeting? Let's say that you and I, again, we go back to the company we own. We discuss the issue. We come to a resolution and we record in the minutes. It could basically, I think most meetings take about 5 minutes, maybe 10, maybe a half an hour. Or we might actually, you and I might go to a nice restaurant and have a dinner and discuss and have our meetings there.
And the meeting itself is not what takes the time. It's recording it that people get all caught up with.
Correct. Going through and recording. And I think that scares people. That's why we've gone ahead and decided to take it out of their hands.
Yeah. And, based on that, and usually when I do these presentations, I'm not with one of the partners, so I don't get in as much trouble. But I actually decided that what I was going to do today is anybody listening to the webinar who wants to get a discount on the Corporate Concierge Program, it's usually $595 for the first year. We're going to do it for $495. And instead of the 1 year time limit, I'm going to give it you 12 months. So if you're interested in taking advantage of that offer, there's going to be a blog post that I'm going to put up with a link to the page. Just go in and you'll be able to get 15 months of our Corporate Concierge Program for only $495. And as soon as I get off the webinar, I'm sure Mike's going to yell at me and all the partners are going to be like, you got to stop giving away our stuff. But that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I didn't know about this, Steve.
Yeah, there you go.
We got good clients.
We do have good clients. And you know what? I really think this is the service of all the services we offer. This is one service. It's so inexpensive for somebody to go in, get this, and have us do their resolutions, amendments, and minutes that it is so well worth it. So if you're interested, just look on our blog on our first page, and it will be up before 5 o'clock. I'm going to go do it as soon as I'm done here.
Yeah. On a side note, just to end up tonight, I hope everyone has gotten their tax returns done and or at least an extension done.
Happy Tax Day.
Happy Tax Day, guys. I think there's some free offers from some companies out there. Do not be one of those people you see on TV every April 15th. You see on the news where the reporter's standing outside the line of in front of the post office where people are dropping off the returns. I sure hope I don't see any of my clients on TV. But anyway,
anybody who works here.
Yeah, or anybody who works here, correct. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing great. Again, if you're a client of ours, feel free to contact us with any questions, concerns you have. Always give us a call, ask the questions. We're here to support you guys, and wish you guys the best of success in your investing.
Thank you. And like I said, look for the blog page for the webinar special. It will be listed as webinar special. It will be the latest story on our blog. Thank you very much. And that is all.